Mary pressed her palm against the cool edge of the suitcase, watching Lauren fight with the zipper that never closed right. The television hummed in the living room with no one watching, a pointless background noise she had left on to fill the space. "Remember your charger," she said, just to say something. Lauren laughed softly, the way she did when she was half amused, half annoyed, and looked around the room as if she might find herself. "I've checked like 3 times, Mom," she answered, shaking her head. Her voice tried to sound grown, but Mary still heard the 10-year-old, the one who once cried over a lost stuffed rabbit in this same room. Suitcases were lined up by the door like quiet, obedient animals, their wheels perfectly aligned on the hardwood floor Lauren had scuffed. Mary had cleaned the house obsessively all week, folding and refolding, like she could organize her way out of what was about to happen tonight. But nothing looked ready, least of all her own chest, tight and burning. The pizza on the coffee table had gone cold, congealed cheese stiff, because neither of them had really eaten, just chewed and swallowed. Lauren's eyes kept sliding to her phone, screen lighting up with messages, friends tracking her journey out of Ohio in little blue chat bubbles. Mary pretended not to notice, clinging to the crumbs of their evening. "Do you remember your first day of school?" Mary asked, out of nowhere, as if reaching backward could slow time down for just a breath. Lauren smiled, pressing a loose strand of hair behind her ear slowly. "You cried more than I did," she teased, and their laughter overlapped. For a moment, the room felt full again, like the years hadn't moved. But then the silence grew heavy between them, thick and electric, the kind of quiet that comes before a storm but never brings rain. Mary felt words jamming at the back of her throat, sharp and raw, questions she wanted to ask, fears she wanted to confess out loud. Instead, she reached for a slice of cold pizza and said nothing. Later, when the lights were off and Lauren's bedroom door was closed, Mary stood alone in the hallway, her hand resting on the frame. She listened to the faint rustle of movement on the other side, trying to memorize the sound, the rhythm, the living presence there. She knew that by tomorrow night, this hallway would echo differently. The alarm went off before the sun, a harsh, metallic insistence, and for a second, Mary forgot why her heart already hurt so much. Then she saw the suitcases by the door, and remembered in a rush, like cold water dumped over her from a great, merciless height. Today, her daughter was leaving Ohio, and leaving her behind. At the airport, the goodbye felt smaller than she imagined it would, crammed between rolling bags and announcements over the speakers. Lauren's hug was tight but quick, like ripping off a bandage fast. "I'll call you when I land," she promised, eyes shiny but determined. Mary nodded, because anything else would have made her break apart. The ride back home was a blur of traffic lights and gray November sky, Columbus passing by her car windows in muted, indifferent colors. Radio voices talked about weather and politics and holiday sales, but it all sounded distant, like someone else's life playing on repeat. Mary drove carefully, as if the road might crack under one wrong move. When she opened the front door, the house exhaled a long, empty breath, the kind that comes after a party when everyone has gone home. The jacket Lauren always left on the chair was not there anymore, and the absence pressed against Mary like an invisible, heavy hand. She closed the door, and the click echoed down the quiet hallway. In the kitchen, 2 coffee mugs waited on the counter, side by side. Out of habit, she had filled them both that morning without thinking. Steam still curled from hers, but the other sat untouched and pointless, a small, porcelain reminder that her routines no longer fit her life. Mary poured it down the sink, feeling something sink inside with it. She walked through each room with slow, unsure steps, testing the air, finding little ghosts of everyday moments in every corner she knew. The dent on the couch where Lauren liked to curl up with her laptop, the mirror with fingerprints from rushed mornings and messy hair. Everything looked the same, yet felt like a museum of a life gone. That night, when she turned off the lamps one by one in each room, the darkness felt thicker than usual, pressing in from all sides. The refrigerator's hum sounded louder, the clocks ticking sharper. Mary lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening for a noise that never came. The silence did not comfort her. It followed her like a shadow. On the 3rd day, the quiet became something almost physical, a weight that settled on Mary's shoulders and would not lift. She wandered the house in search of a task, any excuse to move, until her eyes landed on the basement door she rarely opened. There was nothing she needed down there, but she went anyway. The wooden steps creaked under her as she descended slowly, one hand on the railing, the other skimming the cool concrete wall. the smell of dust and old cardboard wrapped around her like a coat, a strange comfort in its familiarity and stillness and stale air. She reached for the pull chain and flooded the basement with yellow light. Boxers were stacked in uneven towers against the far wall, labels half peeled, ink smudged from years of damp winters. Christmas, Lauren's baby clothes, kitchen stuff. They read, a messy inventory of seasons and memories she had packed away. One box in the corner had no label at all, just a torn strip of tape. Something about that unlabeled box pulled her like a tide, as if there were a magnet hidden inside, humming gently. She knelt down, the concrete cold beneath her jeans, and ran a finger along the edge, feeling the rough cardboard. Her chest tightened with a feeling she couldn't quite name. When she peeled the tape back, it came away in ragged pieces, like it was resisting, trying to hold its secrets a little longer. Inside lay old notebooks, a faded scarf, and stacks of envelopes, all bundled together with a rubber band that had turned brittle. She picked them up carefully, as if they might crumble in her hands. One envelope had her own handwriting on it, slanted and young, the ink a little too dramatic, like every word had been important. To myself, aged 25, it read, and the sight made her breath catch. For a moment she could hear faint echoes of the girl who wrote it, a girl she had not visited in her mind for a very long time. Mary sank down onto the cold floor, legs folding awkwardly, the envelope trembling between her fingers as she opened it. The paper inside was thin and fragile, but the words hit hard, each sentence a reminder of the future she once believed in. As she began to read, the basement around her seemed to vanish. Dear future me, the letter began in a looping, hopeful script, and Mary could almost see herself at 25, pen in hand. She read about plans to travel, to write, to live by the ocean, about never settling for less than a life that felt truly alive. She swallowed hard, wondering when exactly she had settled. The younger Mary on the page talked about stories she wanted to tell, about characters who refused to leave her alone at night. There was a promise to finish a novel before turning 30, a promise made with fierce certainty, with burning conviction. Mary's cheeks burned now, sitting in a basement at 50. Her eyes skimmed over lines about love and independence, about never losing herself inside someone else's needs again. She had written about boundaries and bravery and wild dreams, as if she had known exactly who she was meant to become one day. Somewhere along the way, that version of her had vanished quietly. Mary folded the letter back along its old creases, fingers shaking, feeling shame prickle under her skin like a slow, rising fever. It wasn't just that she hadn't become a novelist or traveled far, it was that she had stopped even wondering what she truly wanted. She had poured herself into motherhood and let the rest dissolve. She reached for another envelope, this one labeled only with a year, 1997, scrawled in blue ink that had started to fade around the edges. Inside was a list of goals, messy and exuberant, full of verbs in bold. Apply to writing workshop, send short story to magazine, move. Every box on the list was still empty, unchecked after all this time. Sitting there among dust and forgotten decorations, she realized slowly that she didn't actually remember choosing to give these things up. There was no dramatic moment of surrender, no loud goodbye to dreams. It had been small decisions, one after another, over many quiet years. A life built out of little compromises she never examined closely. Mary pressed the papers back into the box, but not as carefully this time, because now they felt less like treasures and more like accusations. Still, she couldn't walk away from them, not completely, not yet. As she turned off the basement light and climbed the stairs again, one question followed her up into the dim hallway like a shadow. The question kept circling her mind for days like a restless bird, pecking at the edges of every ordinary moment she tried to have. What would it look like to want something just for herself again, not for Lauren, not for school, not for anyone who needed her? The thought was both thrilling and terrifying in equal measure. On a Wednesday evening, unable to stand her own thoughts anymore, Mary sat at the kitchen table with her laptop open in front of her. She typed writing classes Columbus, Ohio into the search bar slowly, like each letter might explode if she pressed the keys too hard. Dozens of results appeared, and her heart pounded at all that possibility. She clicked on a community college offering a night course, Introduction to Creative Writing, Adults. The title read plainly. The description mentioned stories, voice, and a safe place to share, words that felt like they had been written specifically for her. Her cursor hovered over the register button for a long time. A part of her scoffed at the idea, loud and cruel in her head. "You're 50, it said. "You should be saving for retirement, not dreaming." Another voice, quieter but stubborn, whispered that she was still alive, that time had passed but not completely run out despite her fears. Her finger moved on its own, and she clicked before she could stop it. The confirmation email arrived seconds later with a cheerful chime. "Welcome, Mary." Glowing at the top of her inbox like a small sunrise, she stared at the words, waiting for regret to flood in and drown her. Instead, she felt a thin, fragile thread of excitement tug at her ribs. It wasn't much, but it was the first pull towards something in years. That night, she stood in front of her closet longer than she expected, wondering what someone who belonged in a writing class would wear. Ridiculous, she thought, but still her hands moved carefully over fabrics. She settled on a simple sweater and jeans, nothing dramatic or new. Still, when she saw herself in the mirror, she looked slightly different. As she turned off the bedroom light, the house sank into darkness again, but this time the quiet didn't feel quite as absolute or final. There was a spark of movement inside her, small but undeniably there. The class started in a few days, and she had no idea what awaited her. For the first time since Lauren left, tomorrow didn't feel completely empty. Mary arrived 10 minutes early, clutching her notebook like a shield, the hallway buzzing with voices that felt both distant and sharp. The classroom door was propped open, revealing rows of desks, and she chose one near the back, hoping not to be noticed quickly. Her pulse thudded in her ears, loud enough to drown her thoughts. As others filtered in, she kept her eyes fixed on her notebook, pretending to reread the blank page she had not written on yet. A woman with red glasses laughed across the room with ease. A man in a denim jacket greeted the instructor like an old friend. Mary felt small, like she had wandered into the wrong life. When the instructor asked everyone to write for 5 minutes, Mary's hand hovered above the page before finally touching down. The lines began clumsily, like a rusted faucet sputtering awake. But then, a sentence emerged, surprising her with its softness, a sentence that felt like it came from the girl she once was. She wrote about the sound of a house going quiet after goodbye, about the echo of footsteps she wished she could hear again. The words were fragile, but they flowed in a trembling stream, carrying bits of longing she hadn't admitted even to herself. Her throat tightened as she realized how much she had held in when time was called. She snapped the notebook closed quickly, as if the pages might expose her to the entire classroom. But the man in the denim jacket leaned slightly toward her, smiling gently as he said, "You write with a lot of feeling." Mary blinked, unsure how to absorb a compliment that direct. The instructor asked volunteers to share, and Mary held her breath, hoping no one would notice her anxiety vibrating off her skin. Others read stories about childhood pets and lost wallets, simple, light things that floated effortlessly through the room. Her own words suddenly felt too heavy, too raw to speak aloud. As the class ended, she slipped out quietly, heart still unsteady, but a strange warmth pulsed beneath the layers of fear and doubt. She walked to her car with quicker steps than she expected to take, not sure if she should cry or smile or do something in between. All she knew was that a small, trembling part of her had awakened. The next week, the man in the denim jacket sat beside her casually, as if it were the most natural thing in the world to do so. "Mind if I?" he had asked, already half-seated with confidence, and Mary found herself nodding before her nerves could protest. His presence felt warm, grounding, almost disarming. His name was Daniel, a widower who wrote stories about rivers, about places he had traveled and others he only dreamed about. He spoke with a gentle cadence, like someone used to listening. And when he asked Mary about her writing, he waited patiently. She wasn't sure what startled her more, his question or his sincerity. During a paired exercise, she read him a few lines she had written, her voice wobbly at first, then softening as she found her rhythm. He listened intently, his expression thoughtful and unmoving, and when she finished, he said, "You write like someone waking up." The words hit her chest with a quiet, startling force. No one had talked to her like that in decades, not even herself, and certainly not with a tone that saw past her practiced calm. She felt exposed, but not in a way that made her want to hide, just aware of layers she had forgotten she carried around daily. Her cheeks warmed, and she looked down to steady her breath. After class, they walked toward the parking lot together slowly, the cold air nipping at their jackets as they talked about nothing. Columbus glowed in the distance, streetlights humming softly, and Mary found herself speaking more than she meant to speak. She told him she hadn't written in 25 years. Daniel didn't laugh or frown or search for the right reaction. He simply nodded as if he understood the weight of lost time. Then he said, "Starting again is harder than starting at all," a sentence that settled inside her with a strange tenderness. It felt like a truth she had been waiting to hear. Before they parted, he invited her to read at an open mic night, an event he attended sometimes but had never performed at himself. Her instinct was to refuse, to shrink back into safety quickly, but something kept her from dismissing the idea right away. Instead, she drove home thinking of reasons she might say yes. The night of the open mic came faster than she expected it to, and she nearly canceled 3 times before walking out the door. Her printed pages trembled in her hand as she locked the house, the porch light buzzing gently above her like nervous applause. She whispered, "Just breathe," though it barely helped at all. The cafe was small and dim, with mismatched chairs and soft music, a place that smelled faintly of cinnamon and roasted beans. People chatted in gentle clusters, their voices warm and low. Mary scanned the room, searching for Daniel, not finding him yet. Her stomach twisted, unsure if she hoped he'd come or not. When her name was called, she walked to the stage on shaking knees, each step feeling like a question she wasn't prepared to answer. She unfolded her paper, hands trembling like leaves in strong wind, and for a moment she thought no sound would come from her throat. But then she heard her own breath deepen, anchoring her in place. She read about the quiet house, about shadows on the hallway walls, about the hollow ache of missing someone still living and loved. Her voice started thin, almost breaking on the first paragraph, but then it grew steadier, carried by something beneath fear. By the 3rd paragraph, she felt the words holding her gently. When she finished, the room stayed quiet for one lingering beat, as if everyone needed a moment to absorb what they heard. Then applause rose softly, warm and genuine, without hesitation, and Mary felt her chest swell with something like fragile pride. She blinked hard, overwhelmed by the tenderness of the moment. As she stepped off the stage, Daniel appeared beside her suddenly, his eyes bright with something like admiration or gratitude. "That was beautiful," he said, his voice low and deliberate. Mary felt the compliments settle into her like sunlight on skin. She didn't know how to answer except with a quiet thank you. Walking to her car later, she felt lighter than she had in months, as if the act of reading had released a weight she couldn't name. The night air felt crisp and alive against her warming cheeks, and she realized she had done something she thought impossible. The fear had not disappeared, but it no longer ruled her steps. In the days after the open mic, Mary found herself wandering more, walking through Columbus with fresh eyes she didn't recognize. Coffee shops she had ignored for years now drew her inside softly. Parks she had driven past hundreds of times beckoned her to pause. The city felt freshly painted, unfamiliar yet oddly welcoming. She carried a small notebook everywhere, tucked into her pocket, scribbling down overheard phrases and passing details hungrily. The clatter of a bus stopping too hard, a couple laughing loudly, the scent of rain on cold pavement near Broad Street at dusk. Everything felt like a story waiting for someone to notice it. One afternoon she wandered into a neighborhood she hadn't visited, a place with old brick buildings and murals splashed with color. She paused in front of a bookstore with creaky wooden steps, its windows fogged slightly from the warmth inside its walls. For a reason she couldn't explain, her heart stirred instantly. Inside, stacks of used novels towered like crooked monuments, their pages whispering 1,000 forgotten beginnings. Mary traced her fingers along spines worn soft by old hands, feeling a quiet electricity as memories pricked at her edges. She had loved places like this when she was young. At the back of the store was a tiny reading nook with a lamp, and she sank into the chair, as if her body remembered the shape. She opened a book at random, eyes landing on a hopeful line, something about reinvention and letting yourself be changed. The words hit her like an echo of her own hidden longing. As she sat there, she remembered a similar bookstore in Cincinnati, one she had visited in her early 20s with a close friend. A friend who once told her she was meant to be a storyteller, a friend she had drifted from slowly as adulthood tightened its grip. The memory made her throat ache with unexpected nostalgia. She bought a small stack of used paperbacks before leaving, hugging them to her chest as she stepped into the cool air. Something about the day left her buzzing with soft unease, a sense that she was circling an old truth she had forgotten, and she knew she needed to follow wherever it was leading. That night, sitting at her kitchen table with the books beside her, Mary let the memory from the store surface with sharper clarity. She saw herself at 22, laughing with her best friend Emma, two girls with wild dreams and not enough money for rent. Emma had believed in her writing more fiercely than she did. They once made a pact in that Cincinnati bookstore years ago, a promise to submit their stories together before turning 30. But life had shifted in ways neither of them planned or welcomed, pulling them apart like threads snagged on different corners of fate. Mary had broken the pact quietly, telling no one, not even herself. The more she revisited those years, the heavier her chest became, as if the air had thickened around her with old, stale sorrow. She remembered the moment she chose security over passion, the job offer she couldn't afford to turn down at the time. She remembered never telling Emma she stopped writing at all. Sitting in the dim glow of the kitchen lamp, she let herself feel it, the disappointment, the grief, the shame she had buried so deeply. These weren't just missed opportunities, they were missing pieces, parts of her that she had quietly amputated to survive adulthood. Now, decades later, the wounds still pulsed with tender bruises. She wondered where Emma was now, if she ever finished her novel, if she ever forgave Mary for drifting away without explanation. A longing rose inside her, sudden, unexpected and real. Not just for the friend she lost, but for the self she abandoned. It hit her with the force of something long overdue. Mary closed her notebook slowly, as though sealing the memory shut, but the feeling didn't fade. It lingered like a whisper at her ear. She knew she couldn't move forward without looking back honestly, without confronting the woman she was and the choices she made. Something inside her urged her toward a conversation unfinished. When she turned off the kitchen light and walked toward her room, she knew sleep would not come easily, not with all that she'd stirred. But she also understood, for the first time clearly, what she must do. She needed to find Emma again, if only to return to herself. The past was calling, and she no longer wished to run from it. Mary sat in her car outside the small cafe, gripping the steering wheel, her breath fogging the windshield as doubt tightened her throat. She had found Emma online after hours of hesitant searching, and now they were about to see each other after decades apart. Every memory she held trembled like glass inside her chest. When Emma walked in, Mary recognized her instantly despite the years. Her posture still confident, her smile still warm and knowing. But there were new lines around her eyes, etched by time gently, and when their gazes met, something in Mary nearly came undone. Emma approached with a softness that felt like forgiveness. They talked about small things first, weather and work and aging, letting their words orbit carefully around what truly mattered. Mary felt a knot in her stomach, a growing weight behind her ribs, as if every unspoken truth sat between them at the table quietly. Emma stirred her tea, waiting with patient, old familiarity. Finally, Mary whispered the confession she'd rehearsed for days, telling Emma she had abandoned their pact and drifted away. She spoke of fear, of responsibilities, of surrendering her dreams, every sentence cracking open a piece of the past she had buried. Emma listened without interrupting, her eyes deep with memory. When Mary finished, her voice shook with a mixture of regret and relief, and she stared down at her hands as if expecting them to vanish. Emma reached across the table and touched her wrist gently, saying she had wondered but never blamed her, not even once. The words landed like a soft blanket over an old wound. They talked for hours, unraveling the tangled threads of youth, remembering late-night promises and laughter in old apartments. Emma admitted she had stopped writing for years too, lost in her own storms and responsibilities she never expected. Their shared truth drew them closer, not farther apart. When they stood to leave, Mary felt a quiet shift inside herself, as if some long-locked door had finally opened wide. Emma hugged her tightly, whispering, "You can still become you." The sentence settled into Mary like a steady, glowing ember. Walking to her car, she felt lighter than she had in decades. Back home, Mary spread her pages across the dining table again, reading them with a new clarity she didn't know she possessed. The upcoming storytelling event loomed large in her imagination. It staged both a mountain and a doorway to something deeper. She steadied herself, whispering, one step at a time. She practiced reading aloud, her voice cracking and smoothing, pacing her living room while shadows shifted on the walls. Some lines felt too sharp, others too timid or uncertain, but she let herself experiment, breathing into the words fully. Slowly her doubts softened, making room for courage. One afternoon Daniel came by with coffee and quiet encouragement, listening carefully as she rehearsed with trembling conviction. He nodded after each paragraph, offering gentle reflections, his presence steady like a lighthouse guiding her through fog. Mary felt strangely safe letting him see her vulnerability. Yet even with progress shimmering, fear clung to her ribs, a whisper that her voice didn't deserve to be heard publicly. She wrestled with that doubt late into the night many times, sitting at her desk with only the lamp's glow for company. Every sentence she refined felt like reclaiming a small truth. The morning before the event, she woke with her heart racing, the weight of the day settling on her chest like a stone. She paced the kitchen, brewing coffee she barely tasted, repeating lines to steady her breath and calm her hands. She wondered if bravery always felt this much like trembling. Just as she thought she might lose her nerve completely, her phone buzzed with an incoming call from Seattle. Lauren's name lit the screen, sending a jolt through her body, and Mary hesitated before answering with a shaky hi. "Sweetheart." Her daughter's voice carried a familiar warmth she had missed. Lauren asked about the event gently, sensing her mother's fear, and Mary admitted she was terrified but trying to be brave. "Mom, I'm proud of you," Lauren said softly across the miles. The words wrapped around Mary like a tender, steadying hand. She ended the call feeling changed, steadier, and less alone. That evening the sky over Columbus glowed a soft, quiet blue, and Mary drove to the event with her nerves humming loudly. Before going inside, she stayed in her car for several minutes, breathing deeply, remembering Lauren's voice encouraging her. The fear was still there, but it no longer felt paralyzing. Inside the venue, warm lights flickered against exposed brick walls, and clusters of people chatted with gentle anticipation building. Mary spotted Daniel near the back and felt a wave of relief. He greeted her with a nod that said, "You can do this, easily." She held on to the calm his presence offered so naturally. But before the event began, Mary stepped outside for air alone, the cold breeze brushing against her cheeks like a wake-up call. She stared up at the sky and whispered the truth she'd avoided. She had spent years being mom but not knowing herself fully. Tonight felt like a step toward reclaiming the forgotten parts. Her thoughts drifted to Lauren with unexpected tenderness, remembering the nights she stayed awake through her daughter's fears. Now Lauren was grown, beginning her own life with brave choices, and Mary felt pride bloom where loneliness once took root. She realized love could expand without needing to confine her. When she walked back inside, she felt taller without knowing why, as if something inside her spine had straightened finally. Daniel squeezed her shoulder before she took her seat quietly, his small gesture grounding her in the moment completely. She inhaled deeply, letting herself trust the unfolding night. As the event progressed, storytellers stepped on stage one by one, sharing pieces of themselves with rawness and humor mixed. Mary listened closely, letting each voice warm the room further. Feeling her own courage pulse stronger with every story told, she sensed she belonged here more than she expected to. When her name was announced, her heart kicked hard in her chest, but her feet carried her forward with surprising steadiness. She reached the stage and adjusted the microphone slowly, feeling fear and hope swirl together in equal measure. This moment was hers, and she would not run from it. The lights were warm on her face, soft but undeniably real, and the audience blurred into a gentle, expectant hush. Mary unfolded her pages with careful, steady hands, feeling the years she had lost and the years ahead merging. She whispered the first line to herself before speaking aloud. Her voice wavered at first, thin as a thread stretched tight, but as she read, something inside her began to unfurl. She spoke of homes that became too quiet too quickly, of dreams folded into boxes and buried beneath duty. The truth landed in the room like falling snow, soft but deep. Faces in the audience leaned toward her with quiet empathy, their stillness encouraging her to continue more bravely. She read about fear, about surviving by shrinking herself, about waking up one day unsure of who she had become. Her voice strengthened with every sentence she released. She reached the part about Lauren, about letting go with love, and her throat tightened with a wave of unfiltered emotion. The pages shimmered slightly as her eyes filled with tears, yet she kept reading, steadying herself with each breath. The silence in the room felt reverent, almost sacred. When she finished the last paragraph, she didn't lower her gaze. She let the moment hang between herself and the listeners fully. Applause rose slowly, then swelled into something warm and whole, wrapping around her like a chorus she had long forgotten. Mary felt something old and heavy lift from her shoulders. She left the stage with her heart beating fast but freely, every step lighter than the one before it carried her. Daniel met her halfway, with eyes bright and proud. telling her she had spoken with a courage people rarely find. Mary felt the truth of it settled into her bones deeply. Walking to her car afterward, she didn't feel the night's cold, only the warmth of having met herself again on that stage. The sky was clear and wide above her, full of quiet promise, and she sensed the beginning of a chapter she hadn't written yet. For the first time in years, she felt fully, deeply alive. When Mary opened her front door that night, the silence greeted her, but it no longer felt like an accusation or an empty echo. It felt spacious, gentle, like a room waiting to be filled slowly, not with noise or distraction, but with intention and presence. She inhaled deeply, letting the quiet settle around her softly. She placed her notebook on the table with newfound reverence, touching its cover like one touches something living and warm. The lamplight caught the edge of the page she had written on, a reminder of the words she had just shared bravely on stage. A reminder that she was, at last, choosing herself again. Moving through the house, she noticed details she had ignored. The way shadows gathered in corners without feeling lonely. The way the hardwood floors reflected the soft gold of the light. The peace that pulsed through the air instead of heaviness. It was the same house, but it no longer felt the same inside. She brewed tea slowly, savoring the rhythm of each small action. The sound of water boiling, the soft clink of porcelain meeting wood. These were moments she used to rush through without noticing, but now they felt like anchors, holding her gently in the present. The house breathed with her, calm and steady in quiet harmony. Sitting at the table, she opened her notebook once more, writing not with fear or doubt, but with genuine curiosity. She didn't know what story would come next or how long it'd take, but the uncertainty felt like possibility, not failure anymore. Her pen moved with ease, guided by a softened and open heart. She thought of Lauren, of Emma, of Daniel, of every version of herself, all the pieces that had led her to this reclaimed beginning. She felt gratitude rise like a warm tide beneath her ribs, gratitude for endings that made room for unexpected rebirth. For the first time, she understood the beauty of starting again. When she finally closed the notebook for the night, she smiled softly, feeling the stillness around her as something living and kind. Her home no longer echoed with absence, it hummed with promise. Mary whispered, "I'm here," not to anyone, but to herself fully. And the quiet seemed to answer, "Yes, you are."